The red Mercedes convertible sat gleaming on the painted H, its owner nowhere to be seen as the thunderous roar of rotors split the morning air. Karen Whitmore had finally pushed to far, blocking the only emergency landing zone for miles, while lives hung in the balance. As the massive V-22 Osprey descended through the clouds, its twin engines screaming like mechanical banshees, she would learn that some parking spots come with consequences deadlier than a simple ticket. The aircraft's downwash was about to turn her morning coffee run into a front row seat to chaos she never saw coming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Metro General Hospital complex as Dr. Sarah Chen stepped out of her Honda Civic, already running late for her emergency surgery rotation. The familiar weight of exhaustion pressed against her shoulders 36 hours into what was supposed to be a 24-hour shift, but trauma doesn't follow schedules. As she hurried toward the main entrance, something caught her eye, made her blood pressure spike instantly. There, parked dead center on the hospital's emergency helipad, sat a gleaming red Mercedes SL convertible, its top-down designer handbag visible on the passenger seat. "Are you kidding me?" Sarah muttered, pulling out her phone to call security. The helipad wasn't decorative. 3 times this month alone, it had been the difference between life and death: a construction worker with internal bleeding, a child pulled from a house fire, an elderly woman suffering a massive stroke in a rural area 40 minutes away by ambulance. The bright yellow H painted on the asphalt wasn't a suggestion. It was a lifeline. Before she could dial, a figure emerged from the hospital's main entrance, designer heels clicking purposefully across the pavement. The woman was in her early 40s, blonde hair styled in the kind of precision cut that costs more than most people's monthly rent. Her white blazer was immaculate, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from never being told. No, this had to be the Mercedes owner. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, jogging to intercept her. "That's your car on the helipad, right?" The woman barely glanced in Sarah's direction, fishing through an oversized Louis Vuitton bag. "Yes, and you need to move it immediately. That's an emergency landing zone." Now the woman looked up, her expression shifting from mild irritation to outright disdain as she took in Sarah's rumpled scrubs and tired face. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" "Dr. Sarah Chen, emergency medicine. And you're parked in a zone that could cost someone their life." A perfectly manicured eyebrow arched. "Oh, please. I've been using that spot for weeks. Nobody's said anything, because you've been lucky. But I'm saying something now. Move your car." The woman's laugh was sharp and humorless. "I don't think so, Dr. Shea." Emphasized the title like it was a joke. "I'm Karen Whitmore. My husband is on the hospital board, and I donate more to this place in a year than you probably make. I'll park wherever I damn well please." Sarah felt her jaw clench. She'd dealt with entitled patients and demanding families before, but this was different. This was someone actively endangering lives out of pure selfishness. "Mrs. Whitmore, I don't care if you own the hospital. That helipad is perfectly fine for my use," Karen interrupted, sliding designer sunglasses down from her forehead. "It's not like helicopters land here every day. Besides, where else am I supposed to park? The regular spots are all full of beat-up cars belonging to people who clearly don't belong here." The casual classism in her voice made Sarah's stomach turn. "People like me, you mean?" Karen's smile was cold as winter. "I didn't say that, but if the shoe fits." Before Sarah could respond, her pager erupted in a series of urgent beeps. "Emergency trauma, incoming by air. ETA, 8 minutes. Her blood turned to ice. "You need to move your car right now. We have an air ambulance incoming." Karen shrugged, already walking toward the hospital entrance. "I'm sure they'll figure something out. I'm meeting my tennis instructor for coffee. I'll move it when I'm done." "When you're done," Sarah's voice rose. "This is a medical emergency." "Not my problem," Karen called over her shoulder without turning around. "Maybe next time they should call ahead." Sarah watched in disbelief as Karen disappeared through the automatic doors, leaving her Mercedes gleaming mockingly in the center of the landing zone. She immediately called the hospital's emergency coordinator. "Tom, we have a problem. Someone's parked on the helipad and refuses to move. We've got an incoming air ambulance." Tom Rodriguez's voice crackled through her phone, tense with urgency. "Jesus, Sarah, ETA is 7 minutes now. Can we get the car towed?" "Not in 7 minutes. The The owner is inside the building somewhere. Shit, okay, I'm calling the pilot now. Maybe they can land in the parking lot. Sarah looked around the cramped hospital complex, surrounded by buildings and power lines. The helipad was the only safe landing zone for miles. Tom, you know as well as I do, that's not possible, not safely. A pause. Then we're looking at diverting to St. Mary's. That's an extra 15 minutes transport time, 15 minutes. For someone already fighting for their life, 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours. Sarah felt her hands shake with rage as she stared at the Mercedes. Through the hospital's glass entrance, she could see Karen settling into a chair at the lobby coffee shop, laughing with a tanned man in tennis whites. Her posture was relaxed, carefree, as if she hadn't just potentially signed someone's death warrant. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Patient is a 6-year-old girl. Fell from playground equipment. Possible internal bleeding. Skull. Fracture. Critical condition. A child. A baby. And this woman was sipping coffee while a little girl's life hung in the balance. Sarah found herself walking toward the hospital entrance, her exhaustion replaced by pure fury. She pushed through the automatic doors with enough force to make them shudder. The lobby coffee shop was busy with the usual morning crowd staff, grabbing caffeine before shifts, visitors waiting for visiting hours, patients, families seeking comfort in routine. Karen sat at a corner table, her back to the entrance, gesturing animatedly as she spoke to her tennis instructor, told the maid, "She's being too slow with the upstairs bathroom. I mean, how hard is it to clean a toilet properly? For what? I'm paying her, excuse me?" Sarah's voice cut through Karen's monologue like a scalpel. Karen looked up with undisguised annoyance. "Oh, for God's sake, are you following me now? There's a 6-year-old girl in critical condition who needs to land on that helipad in less than 5 minutes. Move your car," the tennis instructor, a lean man with artificially white teeth, looked between the two women uncertainly. "Karen, maybe we should? Should what? Brad?" Karen's voice rose. "Let this person bully me into giving up my parking spot? I don't think so." Other conversations in the coffee shop began to quiet. As people turned to watch the confrontation, Sarah could feel their attention, but she didn't care. All she could think about was a little girl bleeding somewhere above the clouds, racing against time. "This isn't about a parking spot," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice level. "This is about a child's life." Karen leaned back in her chair, a cruel smile playing at her lips. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. If it was really that serious, they would have called the police to tow my car." "There isn't time. There's always time for proper procedures," Karen interrupted. "I'm not moving my car based on the demands of some resident who thinks she can push people around." The word resident dripped with contempt. Sarah had been an attending physician for 3 years, but Karen had clearly decided she was too young, too tired-looking, too everything to deserve respect. "Mrs. Whitmore," Sarah said, her voice deadly quiet, "I'm going to say this one more time. A child is dying. Your car is blocking the only place that helicopter can land safely. Move it." Karen's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. "Or what? You'll have security escort me out. Call my husband, please. I've been dealing with pushy staff for years." "You're not special." The coffee shop had gone completely silent now. Even the barista had stopped steaming milk to listen. Sarah could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on her, could sense the collective held breath of people watching a train wreck in slow motion. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Tom. 3 minutes out, pilot says he can't wait. Either the pad is clear or we're diverting. 3 minutes. Sarah looked at Karen, who was now examining her nails with studied indifference, clearly enjoying the spectacle she'd created. The woman had no intention of moving. She was getting off on the power, on the attention, on the ability to make a doctor beg. But Sarah wasn't going to beg, not anymore. Instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd never thought she'd use in a situation like this. Major Peterson. "This is Dr. Chen at Metro General. We have a situation." Karen looked up, sharply at the mention of a military rank. The confidence in her expression flickered for just a moment. "Yes, sir, that's correct," Sarah continued, never breaking eye contact with Karen. "We have a civilian vehicle blocking the emergency helipad. Incoming medical emergency, pediatric trauma, ... Yes, sir. A V-22 Osprey would definitely make the point. ... No, sir. I understand the risks. Sometimes people need to learn lessons the hard way. Karen had gone pale beneath her expensive makeup. What are you doing? Sarah ended the call and smiled. It was... The first thing that hit was the sound, not just heard, but felt. A bone-deep vibration that seemed to shake the very foundation of the hospital. Cups dancing on tables as the massive V-22 Osprey descended toward the helipad. Karen pressed her face against the glass. Gods above. 84 feet of gray military steel. Its twin rotors, each 38 feet in diameter, could generate... When those rotors tilted forward for airplane mode, they became propellers that could push the aircraft to nearly 400 miles per hour. Right now, they were pointed straight down, turning the hospital's helipad into the center of an artificial tornado. Top, which Karen had left down in a display of casual confidence, immediately became a liability. The wind caught the soft fabric like a sail, and with a sound like tearing canvas, one of the support struts snapped. "Oh God," Karen whispered, her hands pressed flat against the glass. "Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God." The tennis instructor, Brad, had gone completely white. "Karen, we need to call someone." "The police." The call who... Sarah interrupted, not taking her eyes off the spectacle outside. "The military. They're the ones landing. The hospital administration. They're the ones who authorized the emergency transport when you blocked the regular helicopter." Outside, the Mercedes was beginning to rock violently as the downwash intensified. The Osprey was still 50 feet up, but its twin rotors were already creating a ground effect that turned every loose object in the parking lot into a projectile. Paper cups, cigarette butts, leaves, and debris swirled around the helipad in a chaotic dance. Then the windows started blowing out. Not the hospital's windows; those were built to withstand much more than rotor wash. But the Mercedes side, windows designed for aesthetics rather than industrial-grade wind resistance, began to flex and bow under the incredible pressure differential created by the aircraft's approach. The passenger side window was the first to go, with a sharp crack that was barely audible over the thunderous roar of the rotors. Karen's designer handbag, which had been sitting on the passenger seat, was instantly caught by the wind and sucked up into the maelstrom, spinning like a leather tornado before disappearing somewhere into the parking lot. "My bag," Karen screamed, though no one could hear her over the noise. But the bag was just the beginning. As the Osprey continued its descent, the wind speed at ground level increased exponentially. The Mercedes driver's side window held for another 10 seconds before it surrendered to physics. Showering the interior with safety glass, Sarah found herself mesmerized by the raw display of power. The Osprey wasn't just landing, it was claiming territory, asserting dominance over everything in its path, had given up any pretense of working, and was openly gawking at the destruction outside. "This is insane," someone whispered. "They're going to destroy that car." "Good," said another voice. Sarah turned to see an elderly man in a hospital gown, probably a patient from one of the upper floors, who had come down to watch. "Been watching this entitled bitch parked there for weeks. About time someone did something about it." Karen spun. Around her, face flushed with humiliation and rage. "Excuse me. Lady, I've been coming to this hospital for cancer treatments for 6 months. I've seen that helicopter land here to save lives. I've also seen you park there like you own the place. Today, you picked the wrong day to play queen." Before Karen could respond, another sound joined the cacophony outside the sharp crack of metal under stress. The Mercedes convertible top, already damaged by the initial wind blast, was now being systematically destroyed. The remaining support struts began to bend and twist as the fabric whipped back and forth like a flag in a hurricane. My beautiful car. The Osprey was 30 feet up now, close, enough that they could see the pilot's helmeted head in the cockpit. The aircraft's gray bulk blocked out the sun, casting the entire helipad in shadow. The noise was beyond deafening, was a physical presence, a wall of sound that seemed to compress the air itself. The hospital's maintenance staff had done their best to keep the helipad clear, but no amount of preparation could account for the sheer wind force generated by a military tiltrotor. Loose gravel from the parking lot became shotgun pellets, hammering against the Mercedes paint job with thousands of tiny impacts. A plastic trash can from somewhere in the complex went airborne, tumbling end over end before slamming into the car's rear bumper with enough force to crumple the metal. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down to see a message from Tom Rodriguez. "Jesus Christ, Sarah. What did you do? The entire hospital is shaking." She typed back quickly. "Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. How's the little girl?" The response came immediately. "Stable. Made it to St. Mary's in time. But the board is going crazy. They're getting calls about the noise from 3 miles away." Sarah looked up from her phone to see Karen staring at her with undisguised hatred. "You did this," Karen said, her voice barely audible over the roar. "You called them. This is all your fault." "No," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Despite its weight, the car was no match for the hurricane-force winds being generated above it. The vehicle scraped across the painted asphalt, its tires squealing in protest as they lost traction. Karen watched in horror as her $90,000 convertible was pushed toward the edge of the helipad like a child's toy. The car's alarm began to wail, adding its voice to the mechanical symphony of destruction. But the sound was lost in the overwhelming noise of the aircraft's approach. Stop them. The patients and visitors had heard enough of the confrontation to understand that Karen had brought this on herself, was executing a textbook military landing approach. Unlike civilian helicopter pilots, who might hesitate or abort when faced with ground obstacles, military aviators were trained to complete their missions, regardless of complications. The aircraft had been called to perform an emergency medical transport, and by God it was going to land. At 15 feet, something remarkable happened. Gave up entirely, disappearing into the gray morning sky. The car's interior was now completely exposed to the elements. Karen's tennis gear, scattered papers, shop window followed by what looked like a yoga mat, and several pieces of expensive workout clothing. "My things," Karen whimpered, but her voice had lost its imperious edge. She was no longer the entitled queen of the hospital parking lot. She was just a woman watching her world literally blow apart. The Osprey was 10 feet up now, its landing gear extended like the talons of some enormous mechanical bird of prey. The pilot had perfect control despite the chaos below. This was what military training produced: the ability to land a multi-million-dollar aircraft in conditions that would send civilian pilots running for cover. At 5 feet, the Mercedes finally reached its breaking point. Gust was ripped from its hinges and sent tumbling across the helipad like a piece of cardboard. Karen made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a scream. The Osprey touched down with surprising gentleness, its massive landing gear settling onto the painted H with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The rotors continued to spin at full power for another 30 seconds, ensuring The 2 Marines who entered the coffee shop moved with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested they were accustomed to getting answers to their questions. The taller one, a staff sergeant, according to his insignia, had steel-gray eyes that swept the room like radar before settling on Karen. His name tag read Morrison. The shorter Marine, a corporal named Vasquez, carried a tablet and wore the expression of someone who had just spent the last 10 minutes documenting a very expensive incident. The coffee shop, which had been buzzing with whispered conversations about the spectacular destruction outside, fell silent as the 2 uniformed figures approached Karen's table. "Ma'am," Staff Sergeant Morrison said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people straighten their spines involuntarily. "Are you the owner of the red Mercedes convertible that was parked on the emergency helipad?" Karen looked up at him, her face still streaked with tears and mascara. For a moment, she seemed to consider lying, but the direct stare of a career Marine apparently convinced her that wasn't a viable option. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm Staff Sergeant Morrison, United States Marine Corps. This is Corporal Vasquez. We need to discuss the incident that just occurred." Karen's tennis instructor, Brad, who'd been trying to make himself invisible since the Marines entered, suddenly found his voice. "Look, officers, this is really between the lady and the hospital. We don't need to involve the military." Morrison's gaze shifted to Brad. With the speed and precision of a targeting system locking onto a threat, "Sir, when a civilian vehicle blocks a designated emergency landing zone used by military aircraft, it becomes a federal matter. I suggest you remain silent unless specifically asked to contribute." Brad's mouth snapped shut so fast, Sarah was surprised he didn't bite his tongue. Corporal Vasquez stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that your vehicle was parked in direct violation of federal regulations regarding interference with emergency medical services. The helipad you occupied is registered with the FAA as a restricted landing zone." I didn't know," Karen stammered, though the words sounded hollow even to her. "The helipad is clearly marked," Morrison continued. "Large yellow H painted lines and multiple signs indicating it's for emergency use only. Are you claiming you couldn't see these markings?" Sarah watched the exchange with fascination. She'd seen Karen's entitled arrogance crumble under the Osprey's rotor wash. But now she was witnessing something different, the complete dissolution of someone who had never been held truly accountable for anything in her life. "I've been parking there for weeks," Karen said, her voice gaining a slight edge as she tried to reassert some control. "No one ever said anything before." "That's not a defense, ma'am. That's an admission of repeated federal violations." Vasquez looked up from his tablet. "Staff Sergeant, I've got the incident report started. Vehicle obstruction of emergency landing zone, interference with military operations," and he paused, consulting his notes. The pilot reported that a civilian refused direct orders to clear the landing zone despite being informed of an incoming medical emergency. Morrison's expression darkened. "Is that accurate, ma'am? Did you refuse a direct order to move your vehicle when informed of a medical emergency?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Around the coffee shop, people leaned forward slightly, sensing that they were witnessing something significant. "It wasn't a direct order," Karen said weakly. "It was just some doctor being dramatic." Sarah felt compelled to speak up. "Staff Sergeant, I'm Dr. Chen, the physician who attempted to get Mrs. Whitmore to move her vehicle. I informed her that we had a 6-year-old girl in critical condition incoming by air ambulance. She refused to move and told me it wasn't her problem. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees." Morrison turned back to Karen with an expression that could have cut steel. "You were informed that a child's life was at stake, and you refused to move your vehicle." She didn't have the authority to order me around. "I'm a major donor to this hospital." "My husband is on the board, ma'am," Morrison interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "I don't care if your husband owns this hospital. When a medical professional tells you that a child is dying and your vehicle is preventing life-saving treatment, you move the damn vehicle. Period." Karen's face flushed red. "You can't talk to me like that. I'll have your badge number." The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear the hum of the coffee shop's refrigeration unit. Even the barista had stopped pretending to work and was staring openly at the confrontation. Morrison's smile was not pleasant. "Ma'am, I don't have a badge number. I have a service number, and you're welcome to it. My commanding officer is Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson at Camp Pendleton. Feel free to call him and explain how you blocked an emergency landing zone and endangered a child's life because you felt entitled to park wherever you pleased." Vasquez cleared his throat. "Staff Sergeant, we also need to discuss the damage assessment." Yes, the damage." Morrison's attention returned to Karen. "Your vehicle sustained significant damage during our landing operation. I need to inform you that the United States Marine Corps will not be liable for that damage." Karen's eyes widened. "What do you mean, not liable? You destroyed my car." "No, ma'am. Your car was destroyed because it was illegally parked in a restricted landing zone. When military aircraft are conducting emergency operations, any obstruction is considered a navigational hazard. The aircraft had the right of way, but that's not fair. That car cost $90,000. Morrison consulted his own notes. "According to our preliminary assessment, your vehicle sustained damage to windows, doors, convertible top, interior components, and paint job. Estimated repair cost." He paused dramatically. "Total loss. Vehicle will need to be scrapped." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She sank back into her chair, the fight going out of her completely. But Morrison wasn't finished. "Additionally, ma'am, there's the matter of the cleanup and incident costs." "Cleanup costs?" Vasquez stepped forward again. "When your vehicle was struck by rotor wash, debris was scattered across the hospital complex. We've documented damage to hospital property, including broken windows in the parking structure, damaged landscaping, and various pieces of debris that will need to be collected and disposed of. The hospital will likely bill you for those damages. How much? Hard to say without a full assessment. But given the scope of the debris field, Vasquez made a show of consulting his tablet. I'd estimate somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. Karen made a strangled noise that might have been a sob. Furthermore, Morrison continued relentlessly. There's the matter of the delayed medical transport. The helicopter carrying the injured child had to divert to St. Mary's Hospital, resulting in additional flight time, fuel costs, and medical expenses. Those costs will likely be passed on to you as well. They can't do that, Karen whispered. Ma'am, when your actions directly result in additional emergency services costs, you are absolutely liable for those expenses. That's federal law. Sarah found herself almost feeling sorry for Karen, almost. But then she remembered the woman's cruel smile when she'd refused to move her car. Her casual dismissal of a child's life, her entitled assumption that rules didn't apply to her. Morrison wasn't done. Finally, there's the matter of the federal investigation. Investigation? Yes, ma'am. Interference with emergency medical services is a federal crime. The incident will be investigated by the appropriate authorities. Depending on their findings, you could face criminal charges. The color drained from Karen's face completely. Criminal charges, obstruction of emergency services, interference with federal aircraft operations, reckless endangerment, the list goes on. Each charge carries potential fines and jail time. Karen turned to look desperately around the coffee shop, as if seeking support or sympathy from the gathered crowd. Instead, she found faces ranging from satisfied justice to outright contempt. The elderly cancer patient she'd insulted earlier gave her a thumbs up. This can't be happening, she moaned. Morrison's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. Ma'am, it's happening because you made a series of very poor choices. You parked in a restricted zone. You refused to move when informed of a medical emergency. You prioritized your convenience over a child's life. Actions have consequences. Dr. Sarah Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down and smiled for the first time all morning. It was from Tom Rodriguez. Little girl is stable. Surgery went well. She's going to be fine. Sarah looked up from her phone. Staff Sergeant, I just received word that the child is stable. The surgery was successful. Morrison nodded grimly. That's good news, Doctor, but doesn't change the fact that Mrs. Whitmore's actions could have had a very different outcome. Karen finally found her voice again, though it was small and broken. What happens now? Now, Morrison said, you're going to call someone to tow what's left of your vehicle off the helipad. Then you're going to wait for the various bills to arrive. And then you're going to hope that the federal prosecutors decide your case isn't worth their time. He paused, studying Karen's devastated expression. But I'll tell you what,